Welcome to the Phoenix Project, a space where we turn pain into purpose, and where stories that were once silenced finally have a voice. I'm your host, Jennifer Chandler. And if you've ever felt like you lost yourself, like you don't recognize who you are anymore, this conversation is for you. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by Michele Stone. Michele, welcome to the Phoenix Project. Really glad that you're here. I'd love to start by just giving you some space to share a little bit about your journey and what led you into the work that you're doing today.
Thank you, Jennifer, ever so much for this opportunity to be on your podcast and to share my journey. I started off in the earlier years of my life at probably about 2 years old, disassociating, simply because I had an experience where I had to step out of my body because it was so traumatic. And then again at 6, and then some consistent things started happening when I was 9. So in those experiences, I learned not to trust myself. I learned that my intuition was incorrect, even though I still wanted to believe it, and I was kind of, drawn to try and believe it, but everything in my world taught me that was not something that it was safer for me to not listen to my intuition.
Right.
And so when I became an adult, it was hard for me to go out into the work world and follow directions because my internal clock, not my internal clock, my internal navigation system, not that my integrity was ever challenged, but where I couldn't trust the decisions that I wanted to make.
Right.
And so, but art was always a huge thing for me. And it was always like my reprieve. And so I kept going back to art. And so I spent a lot of my 20s trying to go to school and do all the things that I was told to do. And I had this hole inside of me. And then in my 30s, I had this friend of mine I was working in retail, and I had this friend of mine who said, Michele, if you're waking up in the middle of the night drawing out your dreams, it's probably not a hobby. Like, art is probably who you are. Yeah. And so then I started my art career, and I've been doing it ever since. And so it's art I find is like the way to help heal all of those moments, like when I'm disassociating, when I'm having hard, when there's like hard things happening in my world.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And how did you get into coaching?
Because I saw that the things that I was doing for myself, the books that I've read, that it had helped me, and then I would have conversations with people who it would start to change their lives for the better.
Right.
And so that just started to evolve. And that's what I do. That's the majority of what I do. I kind of have a twofold practice where I do therapeutic arts as a life coach. And so I'm helping people heal through art. And then I also, as an artist and a curator, I'm an art and business coach. So I help artists level up.
Wow.
Especially people who are like emerging or mid-level. I help them succeed and really start to launch their business and monetize. So.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, something that comes up a lot, especially around trauma and coercive control or complex experiences, is this feeling of losing your identity. From your perspective, excuse me, how does trauma impact a person's sense of self?
So with my experience, because I look at it like my trauma started when I was 2.
Mm.
So I was still, that's a point in your life. And I was thinking about this also, is there were several things that happened around that period. I moved from where I'm from in upstate New York down south. So I lived in Alabama and I also lived in Florida.
Mm.
And I had a lot of people who were in my world. I had a Spanish speaking babysitter. I had my father's cousin was deaf. And so, listening to him, there was also another woman in my world who had some like a really heavy Southern draw. And so in those formative years when you're learning how to speak, I had all these different accents and dialects and everything in addition to that trauma. And so for me, art has always been a way to kind of tap into it. And so when I think about like losing my identity at the very beginning, I wasn't able to really wrap words around it. Right. And so then as my parents divorced when I was 4, my mom and I moved back to New York, and the, you know, as a 4-year-old, that in and of itself is also trauma, right?
Absolutely.
And then I moved up there and I had an experience when I was 6 that was traumatic. And so, what I was told is that, do this or we won't be your friends. And so
Right.
that was like another loss of my identity. Like, I have to give away something in order to fit in, if you will.
Correct.
And then, some consistent things started happening when I was 9. And it was just a constant everyday type of losing yourself. I was terrified to speak up, to voice myself, to ask for anything, to to even ask for like new clothes for school,
Right.
or even art supplies,
Basic needs.
and so it was ingrained in me to not be who I was, not accept who I was.
Right.
And so in my later teens, I started having issues with food,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, during that time where there was a lot of like, people did a lot of, what is it? The food pills or whatever, like the diet loss kind of thing.
Diet pills. Yeah.
Yeah, the diet pills. So I started doing that a lot. I was also in sports. And so on the outside, everything looked beautiful.
Right.
But on the inside, I was miserable.
Mm.
And so when I was 19, I decided to pick up my entire life and move from New York to Florida. And that was the beginning of me starting to reclaim my identity.
Yeah. By yourself?
By myself. Yeah.
Wow.
It was my cat, my clothes, and my car.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brave.
It was very brave, but I knew that in my little town that there was nothing that I could, there was nothing that I would be like, I think of it like a dog chasing its tail.
You
That's
weren't gonna grow and thrive there.
No, there was no way.
Right.
And so I took a chance and I moved to Florida and just started exploring and learning and working different jobs and doing things that I knew that I could do until like the next phase came along. And there were a lot of moments where, kind of going back to being taught to go against my intuition, my gut feeling.
Oh yeah.
Where I self-sabotaged.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would think one thing and, and to think have more like negative thoughts. I had a lot of like
Well, you were
ruminating
taught
thoughts.
not to trust yourself.
Right. Yeah. And then there were, the emotional flashbacks that came with everything as far as the disassociation, whenever any moments came up that brought up old trauma, I would go into an emotional flashback. And
Right.
for those people out there who don't know what that is, it's one of those things where when you feel small, like you lose your confidence, you question yourself, you start to make decisions based upon like, something that like the little girl would make or the little boy would make. And those kind of decisions aren't necessarily conducive to, adult life.
Right.
And so.
Can you explain what flashbacks feel like in the moment physically for somebody that may not understand?
So an emotional flashback is, and if I may offer a reference,
Mm-hmm.
Pete Walker's book, Complex PTSD, Thriving, from Surviving to Thriving, he talks about it. And it's a part where the amygdala, which is that fight or flight part in your brain, it's like this little almond shaped size
Right.
piece in the center of your brain where it feels it's like it's terrified. And so something would happen and then your mind kind of goes, oh gosh, I need to protect myself, but I don't know what to do. And so some people kind of shut down. That's where like a lot of people look at it as procrastination, but it's not. It's some, I can't say this for everyone, but a lot of the time it's people shutting down out of a fear that they don't even know that they're having. For me, an emotional flashback is my inner critic starts to show up again, right? It starts to tell me all of the things that I've done wrong or all of the things that, will make me self-sabotage. It makes me want to stay in my house and not go out and not socialize.
We
I
can
avoid,
be our own worst enemies.
yeah. And so in Pete Walker's book, Chapter 8 actually talks about the emotional flashbacks. And so whenever I'm able to identify that I have an emotional flashback, I have it on Audible. And so I immediately go to Chapter 8 and I listen to the 13 steps of the emotional flashbacks.
Oh, good to know. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
it's very helpful.
Yeah. Do you think that people usually realize that it's happening, or is it something that happens slowly over time?
Unless someone's like really trained in it, I don't think that they know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm starting to think of like previous clients and friends that I know that have it. So for them, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety that goes along with it. There's people placating
Mm-hmm.
because, you have your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Right.
And so the majority of the people that I know, they'll like disassociate. You can look at someone and you can kind of watch them. And I'm going to use this phrase like space out to where they look off into the distance.
Yeah.
And that's their brain going, I'm feeling unsafe right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to kind of check out momentarily.
That's kind of what happens to me.
Mm-hmm.
I freeze and I feel like in the moment, and it could be triggered by a song or a smell or a tone of voice. It could be anything, and it'll play like movie scenes in my mind, and
Mm-hmm.
physically I feel like I'm back in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And that can be frightening, you know, if
Absolutely.
you don't understand what's going on and you don't have the tools to self-regulate back to, a stable state. What are some of the signs, would you say, that someone has lost themselves, even if they don't have language for it yet?
I think some of the signs would be like where they want to appease other people instead of standing up for themselves, like almost like a self-betrayal, where the majority of the times that I see it is when all of the actions have to do with outward, like making someone else happy, as
Right.
opposed to coming back in and saying, okay, what do I need to do for me right now? What do I need to do to take care of me? Because
Right.
if you think about the way that complex trauma happens, it's too much too fast. But the majority of it is outside of you. And complex trauma could be in a plethora of different ways. But I think in context of what you and I are talking about, and for this podcast, it's people outside of us.
Right.
And so there's a lot of different ways where we want to stay safe. And would that be, doing the things for other people, or saying the things, or that would placate the other person, or not voicing our own needs.
I think that is such a huge part, and it's an issue for women in general. We just don't know how to say no.
Right.
And especially when you've been through trauma. I know from my own experience, it didn't feel like I was losing myself in the moment. It felt like survival, like adapting, doing whatever I had to do to get through. And it wasn't until much later that I realized I didn't even recognize who I had become.
Right. And then when you meet someone who genuinely wants to know what you want, it's hard to even make a decision.
Absolutely. Even small decisions, going to the grocery store. I mean, picking out eyeglasses, like going to the nail salon and having to pick a color. Sometimes all of those little decisions become super overwhelming.
Right.
Because we're just overloaded.
Well, and again, we're used to doing the thing that we don't necessarily want to do to stay safe.
Doing what other people want us to do.
Or what we perceive other people want us to do. Because that's always a gamble, because there are some people who are out there who are so toxic that today it could be one thing.
You're right.
In the same situation tomorrow, it could be something completely different. And so they kind of keeps you off kilter.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
So, like one day it could be asparagus and the next day it could be broccoli.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're thinking, oh, no, it's asparagus. And, well, no, I told you that I love broccoli.
Right. Right. And you just can't keep up. Yeah. Yeah. And you're playing this guessing game constantly, trying to please the other person. And it's just never, no matter what you do, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the ways that identity loss actually happens, especially in environments involving manipulation, control, or trauma?
I think identity loss is what we have to do. It's almost like we have to be how I'm a visual person.
Me too.
And so I get images of things. And so a lot of the time I'll speak in metaphors. And so I just got an image of an octopus and if you think about it, it changes colors. It morphs into all the different spaces so that it blends in. And
yeah, that's powerful.
So as a human in a situation to where we're being manipulated, number one, gaslighting is a real thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And when and it's an intentional thing where people are purposefully keeping you like ungrounded, back to the broccoli and the asparagus. Right. And I didn't understand it. I knew that something was happening in my world, but I didn't understand it until I actually watched the movie. And it's an old, like 1948 black and white Ingrid Bergman and I don't know, somebody, where it actually shows you that the guy was manipulating the external circumstances and then coming back and telling Ingrid, no, that's not what happened. What do you, and so
making you feel like you're crazy.
It's crazy making. Absolutely. And so with that, it distorts your perspective. And so then you no longer have like grounded footing as to what reality is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How much of this do you think is tied to nervous system responses like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn?
I think so. The fawning in regards to gaslighting is a real thing. There's not a lot of fight that goes along with that.
Right.
And if there is fight, then it's met with fight. It's met with, anger and retaliation and how could you and what are you thinking?
Right.
The freezing and I think a lot of it actually, I see a lot of people start to have more like physical ailments because then they start to think that their reality isn't stable.
Right. And when you're internalizing everything,
right,
and you're not speaking up for yourself,
right,
it does create disease. I mean, what I have found in my life, in certain situations, I know for a fact that the body physically, every cell in your body physically reacts to every thought that you have. And for anybody that doesn't believe this to be true, think about having a nightmare. You can wake up crying. You can wake up with your heart racing, sweating, all these kinds of physical reactions only to what's going on in your mind. And, the things that we tell ourselves, like you spoke earlier about the inner critic, can be so empowering and just as damaging depending on what we're telling ourselves.
That's true. When I first started recognizing I started therapy at like 27 because I was just the self-sabotage in my world and in my life was just really, really paramount. But within the last 10 years, I realized because I had done so much therapy, I was like, there's something else that I'm missing. And I realized a different level of trauma that I had experienced. And so I was part of this group where we wanted to focus primarily on joy. And we kept hitting what are called joy ceilings. And where, you want more joy, you want more happiness, you want more, but you keep like butting up against like trauma and things that hasn't been processed.
Blockages.
Blockages, yes. And so we started studying a guy by the name of Dr. Mario Martinez. He has a book out called The Mind-Body Code. And for those out there, if anyone is interested in it, I would highly recommend the audio version as opposed to the book version because he has meditations at the end of each chapter and 6 chapters. And I always knew that there was something going on in my body, kind of going back to the somatic aspect of things.
Right.
But I felt these, what I now know as signature feelings and temperatures, but I didn't know what they were. And so Mario talks about cross-culturally, he studies centenarians around the world. And he's realized that there are 3 archetypal wounds in every culture: shame, abandonment, and betrayal. And each one of those feelings each one of those archetypal wounds, if you will, has a feeling that's associated with it. There's a part of the body that he calls them portals. There's 5 of them. And instead of like some people may know chakras, it's similar to that, but it's different. It's there instead of 7, there's 5. So like from the toes to the waist is like your safety portal. And then you have the next area would be like your heart. And so it's like your upper rib cage to just underneath like your armpit kind of area. That's your heart chakra. And then a lot of people speak with their hands, right? And so you have like your arms to about your nose where you've got your hands and your mouth. That's more what he calls freedom or expression. And then you have your third eye, like, what you see. So like that's your peace of mind, that whole kind of thing. And then basically your aura. And he calls it what does he call it? Your spirit. I think he calls it like the spiritual aspect of you. And each one of these wounds has a different feeling. So like shame is hot. I'm embarrassed. I want to go hide in the corner. And then abandonment is cold. Like think about, you're left out in the cold, right? And then betrayal is I am furious. Like someone has tricked me and I'm just livid. Right. So that's like boiling over hot. And I didn't realize what was happening in my world until I started feeling shame. Like I started identifying shame. At the time, there was this one person in my life. Every single conversation we had, I was shamed. And once I started like recognizing, wait, is that shame? I mean, what is that? I'm feeling something in my body. Right. What's happening? And then I went, wait, that's shame, because I was like, is it shame? Is it betrayal? Is it abandonment? Right. It's like, nope, that's hot. I feel that in my safety. And for everybody, it's different. Right. And then I'll never forget like the first time that I spoke up, and because each of these archetypal wounds have healing fields. And so for shame, it's honor. For abandonment, it's commitment, like self-commitment. And then for betrayal, it's self-loyalty. And so I recognized that this person was shaming me, and I spoke up and I was like, no, that actually didn't happen. And I can see the look on their face at this moment where they were like, wait, what? Right. Wait, you're speaking up to me?
Yeah,
wait,
they didn't expect you to.
Yeah, how dare you? Like, and then there's this just now detest, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're standing up to me.
How dare you?
Yep. And then I was like, oh, if I'm getting that response, I'm doing the right thing.
Exactly.
Right.
You're hitting a nerve.
I'm hitting a nerve. And so what happens somatically in my body is I honored myself. And every time you honor yourself, or every time when you're feeling abandoned, you have more self-commitment, or every time you're feeling betrayed and you have more self-loyalty, something shifts in your body, and it's like your shoulders start to go back. You start to stand a little taller. You start to get a little braver. You start to have more courage. And it helps you regulate your central nervous system.
Absolutely. And I am learning currently all about nervous system regulation and realizing how dysregulated I was for an extremely long time.
Right.
And it's so important. It affects everything. And, now I'm in a place, thankfully, where I feel safe and grounded, and my nervous system can relax, and that allows me to be able to process all the things, all the trauma, all the history. And when I have those PTSD episodes, I'm not consumed by them. They don't completely throw me off kilter. I'm able to go just kind of acknowledge it. Okay, yeah, that happened. This is happening right now. I'm here, sitting in a chair in my room. I'm grounded. I'm safe. I'm not back on the road. I'm not back in a hotel room, and I'm able to recover faster because my nervous system is more regulated now. And, I think that's the part, people don't really talk about is the rebuilding. And that's where so many people feel stuck, and you talked about your rebuilding and, where do you think somebody would even begin when they feel like they've completely lost who they are and they're just lost in that moment, in the mess, in the story?
First, I want to commend you for, being able to come back to your center.
Thank you.
A lot of what you just said is actually what chapter 8 is about with that complex PTSD book. So pretty much everything you just said.
By Mario Martinez?
No, that one is...
Or Pete Walker?
That's Pete Walker.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Pete Walker. And so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And as far as like, where would they start? I would start by journaling. Because again, back to the metaphors, is when you're ruminating, when you're in a situation to where, you're unsure, there's constant, like, where people outside of you are telling you things that, telling you that the sky is purple or the grass is the grass is orange or whatever.
Right.
Journal. And so sometimes journaling is not very safe.
Right.
What I started doing is little moments of acknowledging little moments of, do I want chai tea or do I want green tea?
Right.
Right. And if you're in that kind of a situation to where you can't really express yourself outwardly, just acknowledge, like, okay, if I had chai tea, how does that make me feel? If I have green tea, how does that make me feel?
Right.
Which feels better, right? But if you are in a space to where you can journal, I would definitely do that, because the mind, when it's ruminating, I think of it like the washing machine on spin cycle. It's going around and around and around.
Absolutely.
And your thoughts, people think that their thoughts are real. They're actually just, thoughts.
Right.
You can just like in meditation, you can take your thoughts and throw them in a cloud and let them pass on by.
Exactly.
But if you're able to, I would probably start off with Mario Martinez and his book, because it helps you go back into your body and find your truth, because your body always knows the truth.
Okay.
Right? And start to learn about, like, what is shame for you? What is abandonment for you? What is betrayal for you? And then how can you, how can you have more honor in your whatever your situation is?
Right.
How can you be more committed to yourself?
How can you honor your spirit?
Right.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And I think it's the part that people don't talk about enough. Rebuilding is not quick.
No.
It's not linear. It's uncomfortable. It's lonely. It's sad. It's a bunch of emotions. And it takes time. And sometimes it's, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And, then you move forward again. And each day is a new day. And like you said, taking those, even if it's just the small decisions, what do I want to eat for breakfast today? Sometimes we just go on autopilot and, like you said, pleasing everybody else and not taking into consideration what is true for us, what is right for us, and what we really want, because we haven't had the tools to be able to speak up for ourselves. But it is possible.
It is. And,
Absolutely.
and even things like trying new things, like even recently, I bought some potato chips that I was like,
Right.
I don't really like that. Or, I'm starting to eat olives. I've never eaten olives before, but it's like, and food is a safe way
Yeah.
to kind of try things, because you're like, oh, you definitely know that, oh, well, I love this, or
Yeah.
I absolutely don't like that at all. And I'm not, and, or maybe taking a walk and going down a path that has more trees versus, being closer to the water, or, just trying little things. I remember when I first got into manifestation, I played a lot with, manifesting green lights and parking spaces and things
Right.
like that. And that kind of built up my manifestation muscles of like, wait, I wanted some flowers and somebody brought me some flowers.
Right.
Okay. Things like that. So it's like, it's the little steps. And you are so right in saying that it's 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And acknowledging the forward movement
Exactly.
is so important.
Yes.
Acknowledging the things that you don't like is just as important as acknowledging the things that you do like. It's like a negative space in a painting, right? It's important to have the negative space so that you could focus on the positive space.
Right.
And one of the other things that I'd like to just absolutely say is cry. Cry. Like if it comes up and you have no idea, I can not tell you how many times I have cried and have no idea whatsoever why I'm crying.
You and me both. Absolutely. It's cathartic.
Yeah.
It's a release. And like you said, you may not even know why, but again, it's your body reacting to whatever's going on in your mind, and it's something that needs to be purged and released. Right. And I want to ask your opinion in terms of, beginning to make decisions for yourself, what you like, especially for somebody who's been in, a coercive control or manipulative or abusive environment. How I think a lot of times we feel like we're being selfish if we go base decisions on what we like or what we want or what's right for us. How do we reconcile that we're not being selfish in those decisions?
First of all, if we're not being selfish, then we're being selfless. Right?
Good point.
And so as an infant who is newly born, we depend on other people to provide things for us. So we're selfish at that point in our lives, right?
Right.
I think people who have gone through trauma and coercive control and any, like all of the abuses, are trained that if we want something, if we need something, even if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, clothing, shelter.
Right.
And for me, it was, my shelter was for me to ask for clothing, additional clothing, I was ridiculed for that.
Right.
And for food that I wanted, I was outside of the normal of we're only going to have, X, Y, and Z.
Right.
I was ridiculed for that. And so when you're taught those kinds of things, it may seem foreign. It may seem uncomfortable, but it's becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Right.
And understanding that a baby cries because it needs, you know, food or to go to
To
the
be
bathroom or whatever.
changed. Right.
Right. And so it's funny because I hear a lot of the phrase of like a squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Mm-hmm.
It is okay for us to ask for what it is our birthright to actually
Exactly.
ask for what we need.
Exactly.
And it may seem bold and it may seem conceited and it may seem like, you know, just completely an absurd request,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important for us to ask for what it's anyone who is not, who kind of like scoffs at that
Mm-hmm.
and says, you know, oh, well, because I used to, one of the things that I was told a lot is like, oh, well, you're being selfish.
Right.
Or even if I didn't want to share the food on my plate,
Mm-hmm.
that was being selfish. And I'm like, no,
Right.
because I'm the one who ordered this food.
Right.
I'm the one who made this
Right.
food. You order yours and I'll order mine and I don't have to share.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I'm an only child or not, I don't have to share. It's not an
Right.
obligation. So again, those are baby steps,
Mm-hmm.
you know, doing it
Absolutely.
and doing it against, you know, taking those steps and saying, you know what, no, I'd like to have potato au gratin today instead. And then seeing, kind of going back to yourself. I call it kneading the dough because you put yourself out there and then
Mm-hmm.
you bring it back and you put yourself out there and you bring it back.
Right.
But asking yourself, like, what do I really want? What do I truly want?
Mm-hmm.
And pausing and just kind of waiting for that answer. And a lot of the time, because you've been gaslit for so long and you've been under coercive control for so long, you won't know the answer. But
Mm-hmm.
if you try it and you go, okay, well, I liked that, so maybe let's try that again. Or I didn't like that, and so great, that's very important. And so let me try something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's, but being selfish is important.
I agree. And, you know, I think so many times it's, at first, it feels foreign. It feels, like you said, conceited or selfish, but we are dishonoring ourselves and our spirit if we are not speaking up for our own needs.
Right.
And that's something that we have to learn. I just want to take a moment and acknowledge how powerful this conversation is, because identity loss is something so many people experience but don't have the words for. And if you're listening right now and something in this episode resonated with you, you are not broken, you are not too far gone, and you are not alone. And if you are in a place where you need support, please don't go through it alone. You can reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or visit thehotline.org for chat support. If you're experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 in the United States. That's the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, and they are available 24/7. And if you believe you may be in immediate danger, please call 911 or your local emergency services. There are people who will listen, who will believe you, and who want to help. And if you'd like to share your story or be considered as a guest on the show, you can reach me directly at phoenixprojectvoices@gmail.com. This is a space for survivors, for healing, and for rebuilding. Michele, I want to thank you again for being here today. I think this was a really important conversation, very valuable, and thank you for sharing your voice.
Jennifer, it has been an absolute honor to be here on your podcast to share my story. and to share hope for others, because,
Absolutely.
it is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, this is the Phoenix Project, where we turn pain into purpose.